The church burned her alive for a black Jesus. Kimpa Vita, Congo 1706, the newborn son they renamed, and the movement Rome buried. What would the world be without black people? Well, nobody would have needed to build a bonfire for a 22-year-old woman whose entire crime was suggesting that the Holy Family might have looked like the people kneeling in front of it. Not a war, not a coup, a sentence. She said Jesus was born in Congo. They lit her on fire for it. If nobody taught you that, do not feel bad. That was on purpose. Follow and share WayBlackWhen for more buried stories they tried to erase. Congo had a black Catholic bishop in 1518, and the Vatican did not consecrate another black African bishop for roughly 400 years after him. Her name was Kimpa Vita. Congo was Catholic before England was. Forget whatever picture you were handed. The Kingdom of Kongo was not waiting to be discovered. It was not converted at gunpoint. It converted itself. In 1491, King Nzinga coup was baptized and took the name Joai, his son. Mvemba Nzinga took the throne in 1509 as Afonso I and made Catholicism the state religion of a sovereign African kingdom. Not a colony, not a mission field. A kingdom that read, wrote, kept archives, and sent diplomats. Then it went further than Europe was ready for. On 5 May 1518, Pope Leo consecrated Afonso's son, Henrique Kinua Mvemba, as Bishop of Utica. A Congolese prince, born in 1495, wearing a mitre, given a see, ordained in Rome. He returned to Congo in 1521 and died in 1531. The first known bishop from Central Africa in history. Then 400 years of nothing. That is not a gap. That is a decision. So by the time Kimpa Vita was born, Congo had been Catholic for nearly 2 centuries. Its people prayed the rosary, kept feast days, carried crucifixes, and named their children Beatriz, Pedro, Antonio, João. This was not borrowed faith. It was theirs. They had been in it longer than the Church of England had existed. Remember that. It makes what happened to her worse, not better. The kingdom breaks. On 29 October 1665, Portuguese colonial forces from Angola met the Congolese army at Mbiwila, also written Ulanga or Ambala. Congo lost. King Antonio I was killed on the field and beheaded. That is the hinge. Everything after it is collapse. The kingdom fractured into rival royal houses, each with its own claimant, its own mountain fortress, its own army. The capital, Sao Salvador, known to Congolese as Mbanza Congo, was sacked repeatedly and finally abandoned in 1678. The cathedral stood open to the sky. The bush grew through the streets of a city that had held tens of thousands of people. And the war made a product. Prisoners. 2 rival Congolese armies capturing each other year after year, and Portuguese and Dutch buyers waiting at Luanda and on the coast with ships bound for Brazil and the Caribbean and Carolina. The Civil War did not just destroy Congo. It fed the Atlantic. That is the world Kimpa Vita was born into. Around 1684, near Mount Kibungu, in the eastern highlands of what is now northern Angola. Her family were Mwana Congo, nobility of royal stock. Her father held military command. She was baptized Beatriz. She was also trained as an Nganga Marinda, a spiritual mediator whose job was to diagnose what was wrong with a community and name it out loud. She moved inside the Kimpasi Society, the initiation network that handled collective affliction. She grew up holding both halves of Congo in her hands, Catholic sacrament and Congolese diagnosis. She never saw them as enemies. That is exactly what she would be executed for, the saint in her head. She got sick, badly. The kind of sick people do not come back from. In her account, a friar appeared to her, Capuchin habit. He told her he was Saint Anthony of Padua, that God had sent him into her head, and that he was there to preach to the people and announce the restoration of the kingdom. She recovered, and she told everyone that Kimpa Vita was dead, that the woman standing in front of them was Saint Anthony and had been since the fever broke. Then she started teaching. Jesus was born in Mbanza Congo, baptized in Nsundi, the northern province. Mary was born of a woman held in slavery in a Congolese noble house. Congo was the Holy Land. Bethlehem was not somewhere else. It was here. She taught that black people came from the fig tree. She rewrote the Salve Regina into a prayer her people called the Salve Antoniana. She threw out the parts of the imported liturgy that made Congolese people foreigners in their own faith, and kept the parts they had made their own. Drumming, dancing, Congolese saints for Congolese people. She told them the crucifix was not the point. Christ was killed on it. Why would you carry the murder weapon and call it protection? And then the line that ended her. Salvation was not in the sacraments the missionaries controlled. It was in your intention. Recorded in the historical accounts of her movement, their deliverance was in their own hands and not in the hands of a foreign god whose saints did not look like them. Notice what that actually threatens. She was not attacking Christianity. She was removing the middleman. If a Congolese woman can speak for a saint and Congo is the Holy Land and salvation runs through intention rather than through European priests, then the Capuchin mission is not the road to God. It is a toll booth. They understood that immediately. She took the capital back with nothing but people. In 1705, Kimpa Vita walked into the ruins of Sao Salvador and stayed. She set up in the wreck of the cathedral. And people came, thousands of them. They cut back the bush, cleared the plazas, and refilled a capital that had been empty for 27 years. A city 3 warring kings with standing armies could not reoccupy. A 21-year-old woman reoccupied with a message. She sent out disciples she called Little Anthonys, each one carrying the movement into a different province, each one telling the rival claimants the same thing. Stop, reunify, come home. This was not mysticism floating above politics. This was a peace plan. She was trying to end a civil war that was feeding her people into slave ships, and she was the only person in Congo who had actually gotten the capital repopulated. King Pedro IV was sitting on his mountain at Kibangu, one claimant among several, and she asked him to come down and take the throne in a real city. He did not thank her. Because here is what a king sees when a woman with no army fills his capital and the country listens to her. He sees that she does not need him. He sees that legitimacy has moved, and it did not move to him. One noble did see the opportunity. Pedro Constantinho de Silva, called Kibanga, allied with her, calculating that the Antonian movement could carry him to the throne. So now she was not just a prophet. She was a faction. That made her killable. A baby cried. She preached chastity. Then she became pregnant by a man recorded as Joe Barrow. She left the capital to give birth in secret near her home country. Pedro IV's people found her because they heard the baby. That is the whole arrest. No siege, no battle, no informant. A newborn made a sound. The trial nobody has a record of. She was tried under Congo civil law on charges of heresy and witchcraft. The 2 Capuchin missionaries in the country, Bernardo de Gallo and Lorenzo de Luca, questioned her about her beliefs. De Gallo's written account is the reason we know as much as we do. The man who helped destroy her is the reason her words survived at all. No transcript of the trial itself survives. On 2 July 1706 at Ivalulu, Kimpa Vita was burned alive. Joe Barrow was burned with her. She was 22 years old. Her infant son was not killed. He was taken from her and handed to the missionaries. She had named him Antonio. Lorenzo de Luca renamed him Geronimo. They took her life, then her movement, then her son's name. They burned her. It kept going. Killing her did not kill it. That is how you know it was real. The Antonians held Sao Salvador for nearly 3 more years under Kibanga, praying her prayers in the city she had refilled. On 15 February 1709, Pedro IV marched on the capital with an army reported at 20,000. The Antonians were routed. Kibanga tried to invoke a royal pardon in the middle of the collapse. Nobody listened. He was killed and beheaded. Pedro IV took Sao Salvador and restored it as the capital of Congo that same year, 1709. He restored the city she had refilled. He did it on the ground she cleared. And the version that got written down was the one where she was a witch and he was the restorer. Now follow where her defeated followers went. Congo's civil wars converted losing sides into cargo. Captives moved through the ports to the Americas. In the American Historical Review in 1991, historian John Thornton published a study arguing that the Congolese who launched the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina on 9 September 1739, the largest uprising of enslaved people in the mainland British colonies before the Revolution, were Congolese Catholics with military training, marching under a banner, out of exactly this world of war. Congo's Dead Prophet, Congo's Broken War, and a road in South Carolina 33 years later. The same people, the same century, the same fire. So what would the world be without black people? Well, you would not have the first documented mass movement in African history to take a European religion, keep the faith, and refuse the ownership. That is what Antonianism was, not rejection of Christianity, repossession of it. Every African independent church that followed is standing in her shadow. Kimbangism in the Congo, Matswanism, Tokoism. Millions of people across Central Africa today worship inside traditions that do exactly what she was burned for doing, which is insisting that God did not need European management to reach African people. Every black Jesus you have ever seen in a church, on a wall, in a film, in a mural painted by a neighborhood that had to make its own images, is downstream of an argument she made out loud in 1704 and paid for with her body in 1706. And the record itself. The Kingdom of Kongo is the reason you cannot honestly say Christianity came to Africa with colonialism. Congo was Catholic before the Reformation. It had a bishop before Henry VIII broke with Rome. The people who told you Africans needed to be brought to God were selling something to a continent that had already gotten there on its own terms, and then burned a woman for saying so. In Uaj, Angola, there is a public university called Universidade Kimpa Vita. Students walk under her name every day. 320 years after a church helped a king turn her into ash, the name is still standing, and the men who lit the fire are footnotes in her story. She was 22. She had a newborn. She had no army, no throne, and no protection. She refilled a dead capital with nothing but a sentence, and the sentence was that God looked like the people praying. They burned her for it on 2 July 1706, and then they took her baby and changed his name because erasing her was not enough. They needed her not to have continued. She continued anyway. Kimpa Vita. Subscribe for more documented Black history.